on 95.3 FM in Windhoek, Desert Radio. The Bold Voice.
Now, if you want to see who we're in conversation with, you can head over to Facebook where we are live. And if you are already watching from our Facebook platform, you will see that we have Affirmative Repositioning activist in studio that is in Dimbulukeni Nauyoma. And he's joining us this morning to talk to us about the importance and challenges that activists in Namibia face. Dimbulukeni, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Surviving.
Surviving? Yeah, I mean, busy time for you.
Not really.
Not really?
It's really just that the country demands us to survive. In the situation where we are, we need to adapt. So it's one of those situations, guys. 2022, aye.
Showing flames.
It's not an easy one.
We'll definitely get into that in just a second. I mean, I think there is quite a little bit for us to unpack. But before we do, we also just want to get to know you. You know, if we have to think about your origin story, who you are as a person, and what influenced you to get to where you are right now. Talk to us about all that. Who is Dimbulukeni?
Yeah, you see, that's the most difficult question. I always fail to answer, but in short, it's a young little man who grew up from the dusty streets. No. There are no streets in my village.
Okay.
So I grew up in Odibo. I think I was born here in Windhoek, in Katotora Hospital. And then by the time when I was around, I think 6 months or a year, my aunt took me to my grandmother, and I was my grandmother's firstborn from his first male child.
Okay.
Yeah, so that significance, I don't know for what. So then she decided I'm not going back to Windhoek. Then my mother, over time, queried, where's the child? No, the child is coming. Where's the child? The child is coming. The child never came. And then the child was baptized in the village. And then I think until 2002, I was still in the village. So I grew up herding kettles, goats. So practically playing, what is this thing? So when my parents were in Windhoek, so I had access to socks. So we utilized my socks to make football, ball. So we play in those mud and stuff like that. And I remember I was the only child with that student prince bag, you know, that one with a lot of racks where you put your separate your books. So usually I had to, because the circumstances in the house demanded that I can't be the only child who's privileged. So I literally had to go with a plastic to school. So that is my background. Came to Windhoek, went to Namutenya. I remember being in an Afrikaans class by the late Meneer Hasselman. And he asked me in Afrikaans and I respond in English. And he says, it's an Afrikaans class, it's an Engels class. So I went to apply for Shindonga class because that's what I know.
Yeah.
So they dumped me in this Afrikaans class, and it was a challenge for 2 years. So I came here in grade 6 and then 7. Then eventually we went to attempt to speak French at Chifidi. After that, life happened, you know. Grade 12 is not easy, guys. Those of you that are preparing for exams, prepare well.
Yeah.
So we were there in the streets of Namcol. Yeah, eventually we found ourselves at IOB and then the universities, man. And I think my inspiration usually was my father. He always was looking up to making change in society. I mean, he stood up for his generation then at the age of 16. My mother left this country when she was only also 16, and her parents didn't know. So I remember the first day when we on the 9th of November 2014, when we went to Klenekupe, I didn't tell my mother, so I just woke up, took the shovels, the spades, put them in the car. I drove out, pick up everybody, and then we went. And this news broke. So to her it was, hey, wait. This child just walked out of my house like that. So we had to remind her and said, you see, when you left, you never told your parents. So really my motivations come from their desire to have wanted our country to be liberated then. And that is what fuels my activism every day.
Wow.
Now, yours and the likes of Job and most of you within the AR, there's this sort of a brand of youth activism, right? That comes from the style of activism that you guys are doing now and have done over the years. How vital do you think it is, for society to have such a vibrant activism movement like yours, especially amongst young people? Let's quickly tackle that before we get into recent events.
Yeah. So I think the most important aspect of it is that it's of critical importance that society, particularly such as ours, embraces activism. And when we speak about activism, people always think that there is a monopoly to activism. Somebody can stand up and say, look, I'm standing up for the disabled. I'm standing up for something that is not right in society. You have human rights activists. You have a generation, they call it Z or something.
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Yes. They have a different agenda. They are looking at when we speak about human rights and human dignity. So how do we marry the two and without violating one another? So they stand up for their rights as much as people think it's not important. Ne? Somebody who stands up for the trees. So others would say, no, that's the least important thing in our society. But you need somebody to speak about it so that we are able to realize what is it that we're really doing in society and how can we consciously discuss and analyze some of these issues. So in terms of our positioning where we are as a country, I think it's very paramount that our young people must move away from being known from entertainment, sex and alcohol. Because the more, yes, we need to dance to amapiano, we need to dance to our, whatever music comes. But in as much as we are dancing, we must be able to articulate issues that are happening. The most interesting thing that happened recently is that, when this COVID came, people started losing jobs. The middle income, those that, some of us who just drive our nice cars, we get to our flats, we drink our wine, and then we chill. Suddenly, reality kicks in. And, I could be next from my losing my job. And that is when others started to consciously start advocating for issues happening at their workplaces. And you really want to encourage everybody to say, yes, it is good to speak out. Yes, it is good to educate one another. Sometimes you don't also need to speak out, Just have a conversation with the next person. Try to build a relationship. Understand what are the issues that are happening. And let's see where we can take this country forward.
And, speaking of recent events and just people having voice, what we see happening a lot in the activism and advocacy space is people having brushes with the law. You recently had your own brushes with the law over your activism. Now, with that in mind, do you think that Namibia has a conducive enough environment for dissenting voices that allows people to stand up, speak out, and raise their concerns or issues that they have with how things are going?
Absolutely. I think what had happened to us is some sort of intimidating tactics to want to reduce our activism to anarchy. People must realize that there's a difference between the two. There's anarchy and there's activism. So if we want to be anarchic, for example, and if we were determined to burn that Chinatown, we could have done it. And we could have been charged with arson and whatever it is. We understand what the law requires of us to do. The problem is that people think that when you do activism, you become a hooligan. Or when they see, and I was having a discussion with one of the trained soldiers, and he says, you see, when we were in the class and we're being taught about riot and rioting, we only saw danger, we never saw people. So the ability of our police force to rethink and reshape their understanding that was a class that didn't give you a real life scenario. And when you are told people must just disperse, you can't just disperse people without understanding why the people assembled in the first place. So what was purported to have been created is an image of saying that for anybody else who must stand up for our people, what you'd face eventually was prison. I mean, we've been protesting on the street for many years, and it is for the second time now that I find myself behind bars. But it's not that it discourages you, but it in fact fuels you, your energy to continue fighting for the people, because it's only those that are doing something right that they would always try to stop. Now, the most important aspect of our young activists, that what they must take home, is that, you see, in activism there's strategies and tactics. There's always something that you want to achieve, and there's something that you calculate before you do anything. See, these are the risks and these are the prawns.
D, I'll have to interrupt you right there. We're just going to go into a short ad break and then you can continue after that.
Okay.
All right.
Brace yourselves for bigger secrets, better gossip, and spicier drama as the housemates get to spill all the tea. Nothing is off limits. Catch all the inside gist from the Big Brother Naija house on BBN Season 7, The Buzz, hosted by Toke Makiwa.
Don't miss any episode of The Buzz every week, only on Showmax. Sign up at showmax.com. Desert Radio, the bold voice.
Indeed, it is Desert Radio 95.3 FM. Desertradio.fm is our stream link. You can also catch us on Facebook at The Namibian. We are in conversation this morning with the Affirmative Repositioning Movement activist. That's Dimbulukeni Nauyoma. And he was on a very, very interesting thought just before we interrupted him. D, you can continue.
Yeah, so when you now look at that scenario, and of course, I remember 2021 or 2020, when, what is the generation again?
Gen Z.
Yeah, Gen Z took to the street with Shut It All Down.
Yeah.
Those young kids were arrested as young as 16, you know, then they're thrown in that prison cell. And of course, they stayed there for about, I think, 3 to 6 hours. And they came out stronger, because they never stopped. And that is the motivation that activists must actually go through and say, you can be thrown at your lower end, but eventually you shall make it through. And what really motivates you is the situation that you find yourself in. For example, I thank the police for throwing me in prison. Not custody, prison in itself, because remember, we have been speaking as activists around, there's a 3-course meal, there's eggs in the morning. Chief, there's no eggs in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, there's den pap, and then you find a huge soup and pap that you eat at 2 as dinner, you know. And if you don't strategize on how to eat, it actually teaches you survival mode and survival instincts. But also, we get an opportunity to analyze why our young people are in prison. Some of them, majority of them, are in there for housebreaking. They are in there for minor robberies. Just a few of them are in there for rape and murder. But we don't actually go back and think, why do we have such... I met a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, and the other one turned 18, because there's now apparently a juvenile prison. So if you're under 18, you are sent to Tsumeb. So if you are 18, Chief, you now need to survive because you're an adult. So you realize how those young kids have been in the prison system for a very long time. And they go out and they come in, they go out and they come in. I had a conversation with an old man who has been there now for about 20 years. So it's that in and out situation. And you realize that he tells me that, you see, after fighting for this country, I came back and there was nothing. And the only thing I could find was stock theft. Because I tried everything. I can't become a cleaner. Because remember, when I started killing this cattle of the white men, I got an income to feed my family. Now, an average cleaner gets 2,500. What do I do with it? I get one cow, I get the carcass, I make close to 10 to 15,000. And that sustains me for about 2 months before I go back for the next skill. And that is how people, you get to understand their circumstances and say, are we saying that? And he has children, and his children are growing up to see what his father does. And that society, ultimately, which has failed this old man, is now going to fail his children and his great-grandchildren, because there's nobody who's going to tell them, go to school and become motivated to do something better. And what I enjoyed most was the verdict of our bail application, to say, look, and we want to put it on record that the magistrate that we appeared before in Karatura was a former police inspector who, because you see, these guys mentally don't retire from one job to another.
Yeah.
So when the inspector general and others give him a call, it's so evident to say that even when he says that our bail is denied, the grounds that he laid forth, they were saying, okay, let's throw it to the law, but they realized that we defeated them at Katutura. So they said, no, let them hold and go fight it out again at the High Court as an appeal court. Now, the appeal court what I like about it has made specific references to say you can't utilize the rule of men over the rule of law.
Yeah.
So if we have 5 and you charge us with 1, and you see, then this is what makes our police force look lazy and incompetent, because you can't charge me and you over the same charge, the same narration of the story and everything. Then you say I'm the kingpin. But in your charge sheet, it doesn't show that I'm the kingpin. The evidence presented is the same. And you can't say, no, this one's at the discretion of the police, can be removed. This one's can be. So, and people must always, and we want to demystify these things. It's not about the Chinese or Chinese nationals. Unfortunately, we had one ran away, or some ran away yesterday.
Yeah.
we saw that.
So it's not about the Chinese, you know. It is about fighting against the system that is oppressing our people. Now, the Chinese found comfort in the weaknesses of our system. And they exploit our people through cheap labor. They exploit ourselves through counterfeit and cheap material goods. Remember, the Chinese will tell you, come to China, what your budget is what we'll provide you with. So we don't have, even our regulatory standards bureau does not go to Chinatown and say, no, this is not fit for our consumption. Remember, before Chinatown, there were shops who provided for clothes for the lower income. But what the Chinese came, they went to degrade that value. It doesn't mean that if the item does not have a Nike brand, it can be a counterfeit. Because this is what our law says, in the eyes of our people, is that because they are, if you go to China, there's about extra 5, 10 to 20 brands that we don't know. But if I come with those brands to Namibia, and this is how terrible it is, when you get to the airport, they say, if you have 5 t-shirts of Nike, it's fine. More than 5, you're going to sell. What if we are 20 in the house? So they confiscate if there are more than 5. But the law says counterfeit is counterfeit. Doesn't matter how many they are. So the application of so what we're debating about is the application of this law, in saying you can't want to crucify others and ensure that others are surviving. And the worst thing now is that they've started again, Namra and others. They've now started to even confiscate everything. Say, no, for as long as it now came from China, I had the past 2 days, this has been the crisis. And we are trying to get in touch with Namra to verify and say, colleagues, our application of the law, we don't want to go back where we were 2 months ago, but we can rally these people together and we get back to the situation where we were, because clearly we've not learned, of what we want to achieve. We are simply saying, if the law does not work for our people, let the lawmakers go and change that law so that it suits the people. So that, because remember what law is. Law is supposed to be a just thing for everybody. It's not just for some. But the law that we are experiencing in our country, particularly the one that relates to counterfeit, for example, it is against a oppressed and unemployed generation. These unemployed young people who finished their degrees.
We're back at Biggie's for Big Brother Niger Season 7. Who will bring the heat? What shakeups will happen within this world? We'll be discussing everything. Don't miss the new season of The Buzz, Tuesdays and Saturdays from 7 p.m. only on Showmax. With never seen before snippets, interviews and reviews hosted by me, Foke Makinwa. Subscribe now at www.showmax.com.
So they exercise the ban to say you can only bring in 1 car at a time. Because the boys would rally their family and they will go there and they will get 5 cars. And the market was fluctuated with this donkey Botswanas. And it became a problem. So is the order with me generation. It's now becoming a problem to those that have shops. And because remember, everyone doesn't want to go to Starfords and Edgar's and Jet and stuff like that. Because if I can get the same quality for a better price, then I'll definitely go for a better price.
And Dee, we are running a little bit out of time, but just before we let you go, I just want us to very quickly and very briefly just unpack this perhaps generational dissonance that we have, right? Because we have a generation before us that literally was doing the same thing, fighting systems that were oppressing the people, fighting laws that were oppressing the system. And then we're seeing now that with the current millennial generation that is doing the same thing, but for different causes, of course, as you said, that being compared or considered as anarchy. So where is this disconnect happening, or why is this disconnect happening between a generation that has also fought for a different type of justice and are now looking down on the activism that is happening within current generations?
The generation of yesteryears fought against an oppressive system of white monopoly and racism and apartheid and colonialism. Those ones we knew, because they were evident and they were in our faces. So for you to cross the line, you needed a pass, Only a selected few could go and at a certain age go seek for employment. And you must say yes, boss every day. Today we don't say yes, boss every day. Because our yes boss is now a black man. And we have inherited a system that we have not sat down after independence and say, what was oppressing our people and how do we make their lives better? All we did was exchange offices. One guy comes out, the next guy comes in, the system remains the same. And we have not changed that. So now when you stand up against the system, it is perceived to be standing up against your own people. I remember in 2014, people were saying, no, you are against Hage because he's coming in and he's becoming president. Okay? Maybe they had a point. But we stood up against a system that is unable to provide land for our people. It had nothing to deal with President Geinkop. President Geinkop in Korihas, in his last rally, said the willing buyer, willing seller must be revisited. Shortly after that, they held the second land conference. They made pronouncements on the willing buyer, willing seller, but until today, even through this land resettlement, willing buyer, willing seller still applies because the person who has the land must give an offer, and if government cannot afford, they go to the market. Now, in most cases, government does not afford, and they obviously go to the market. So what we are trying to fight against and perhaps put into context is to say that there's this system of a conventional way of delivering houses to people. We started a project under Property Group Save Namibia. It's a private development where we have analyzed.
I'm so sorry. We are literally out of time. We have a minute to go until news, but we can definitely extend this conversation another time. We do appreciate you coming through for us and having this conversation on activism, which I think is a very, very important element and topic to touch on, especially within the country in this current dispensation. But for your time this morning, really do appreciate it.
No, thank you very much.